Hello, everyone. On behalf of Busboys and Poets, thank you so much for joining us for this discussion about Smoke Kings with Jahmal Mayfield. One moment, please. It's open in the other tab, too. Okay. Busboys and Poets is a community where racial and cultural connections are consciously uplifted and a space for art, culture, and politics to intentionally collide. I also want to remind you that there will be a Q&A after the discussion, and Smoke Kings is available for purchase through Eventbrite. We also have copies available at our 14th and V location for all you local DC folks. Through our Books to Go program, you can order the book with your meal on Uber Eats, DoorDash, Postmates, and Grubhub. So make sure you can get a copy that way as well. And I'll read a brief introduction about our book. Nate Evers, a young Black political activist, struggles with rage as his people are still being killed in the streets 62 years after Emmett Till. When his little cousin is murdered, Nate shuns the graffiti murals, candlelight vigils, and Twitter hashtags that are commonplace after these senseless deaths. Instead, he leads three grief-stricken friends on a mission of retribution, kidnapping, and the descendants of long-ago perpetrators of hate crimes, confronting the targets with their racist lineages and forcing them to pay reparations to a community fund. For three of the group members, the results mean justice. For Nate, pure revenge. Not all targets go quietly into the night, though, and Nate and his friends' world spirals out of control when they confront the wrong man. Now the leader of a white supremacist group is hot on their tail, as is a jaded lawman with some disturbingly racist views of his own. As the four vigilantes fight to thwart their ruthless pursuers, they're forced to accept an age-old truth. Before you embark on a journey of revenge, dig two graves. Smoke Kings is a powerful and propulsive novel with a diverse and unforgettable cast of characters. Like Steph Chaw's Your House Will Pay, it explores decades of racial tensions through a fictional landscape where the line between justice and revenge is blurred. Now, about our speaker here tonight. Jahmal Mayfield was born in Virginia but currently resides in New Jersey. In addition to writing crime fiction, he serves as the director of a nonprofit program that provides employment support to people with disabilities. Smoke Kings was inspired by Kimberly Jones's passionate viral video, How Can We Win? Now I'll pass it off to our speaker here tonight.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. It is an absolute honor to be on tonight. Love Busboys and Poets and everything that you represent and everything that you're doing. So just thrilled that you thought of me. I'll talk a little bit about Smoke Kings and how it came to be, the writing process. I'll read a brief passage as well. And then we'll go from there. I'd love to answer questions from the audience. I appreciate Madison for that really, kind introduction. Smoke Kings, first of all, you really came from a very personal place to begin. My little cousin was murdered in 2018, and I remember standing out on the street, and we were having a candlelight vigil. And here's another young Black man gone far too soon. And it just felt like the vigil wasn't enough, and, I was used to seeing the things that we've all seen, Twitter hashtags and graffiti murals and T-shirts and candlelight vigils and things of that nature. And it just didn't feel like enough. So I had a place of frustration and hurt and anger all kind of wrapped into one. Then a couple years later, we had the summer of George Floyd, and just for my own humanity, I forced myself to watch all 9 minutes and some change of that video, and I wouldn't look away. And it was a very painful and difficult video to watch. But again, I just felt like for my own humanity, I needed to see it. I needed to watch it. Can't exactly articulate why, but it felt important to me in the moment. And at that moment, I'm just dealing with a lot of anger and rage. And I not too soon after that, I saw poet and activist Kimberly Jones's viral video. I think I saw it through the Trevor Noah show. And she was standing basically in what was a war zone in Minneapolis. You know, the rioting and looting had occurred. You know, the targets were burnt down, and, you know, stores and things of that nature. And what struck me with the video, it was amazing to me. I'd seen rage before. I felt my own rage. I felt my own anger, but I'd never seen rage married with the intelligence that she spoke with quite in that way before. And so I just found it just striking. I couldn't look away from that either. And then she got to the end of the video and she was talking about, you know, just the history of oppression that have happened, you know, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and all these things down through history that, you know, Black folks have endured and suffered through. And she got to the end of it and she said, and they are lucky that what Black folks are looking for is equality and not revenge. And that particular line just really, really struck with me. I am a huge crime fiction fan, have been trying to write and get crime fiction published for a very, very long time. And I felt like in that one line, I had the seed of what could be a pretty powerful, if I was able to execute it, revenge thriller. And they are lucky that what Black people are looking for is equality and not revenge. And so at that moment, I started thinking about some characters that ultimately ended up in Smoke Kings, and just this group of young people that had suffered and endured another tragedy, as we did as a nation with George Floyd, and as I did personally with my cousin, and got to a point where they said, you know, enough is enough. The Twitter hashtags, the graffiti murals, the candlelight vigils are not enough. And so they decided and hatched this plan to kidnap the descendants of long ago perpetrators of hate crimes and charge them reparations. And I hadn't read anything like that or seen anything like that. And again, I'm a huge crime fiction fan and read pretty widely. And so I thought, you know, I'm gonna explore this, and I want to work on this. The interesting thing that happened over the course of that writing, though, is I went through my own transformation. I realized pretty early on that I was just coming from a place of rage, and that wasn't true to the inspiration that I had gotten from Kimberly Jones. She was coming from a place of anger, but she had a certain amount of intelligence. And so I kind of shifted my thinking and my process as I started working on Smoke Kings at that point. And whether people love it or hate it, what I really wanted to write was a book that, to the best of my ability, was honest and talked about race in ways that it hadn't been talked about maybe in many other books. And we've gotten some really wonderful, wonderful reviews. And one that I'm really particularly proud of came from Kirkus Reviews, which is one of the large trade publications that reviews books. And I can't remember the exact words, but they said something to the nature of race has rarely been as affectingly discussed as it is in this novel. And that is the highest compliment, because that is what I was attempting to do. I wanted to write a book that would spark conversation. I wanted to write a book that would be uncomfortable for people to read. I wanted to write a book that was propulsive and kept you turning the pages. I wanted to write a book that opened up a dialogue and got us talking about race, and maybe in a different way. I think race continues to be the issue that it is because we don't have open and honest conversations about it. So to the best of my ability, I wanted to really write a book that was as honest as I could make the book. And I'm really proud of the early reviews that we've gotten. The New York Times picked it as one of the 5 best crime novels of the year, which is just amazing to me. I can't even believe that. And we've gotten really wonderful publicity, Los Angeles Times and the Washington Post and things of that nature. So it's really been embraced. And I know it's a difficult book and it's not an easy read, but I like to believe that it's a powerful read. I thought what I would jump off with is I'd read the very first passage in the book. And again, we have this group of political activists led by a young man. His name is Nate Evers, and his cousin Joshua. And they discover that their little cousin, Nate's little cousin, and Joshua's little brother, has been murdered in an act of violence. And at that point, they're frustrated, they're angry. They again hatch this plan to kidnap the long ago descendants, descendants of long ago perpetrators of hate crimes, and start to charge them reparations. And as you can imagine, a scheme like that goes off the rails, which is where the thriller aspects of Smoke Kings comes in. But I'm going to read the first passage, which is Nate and Joshua discovering and going and learning that Nate's little cousin and Joshua's little brother, Darius, is dead. And so this is February 20th, 2017. And it's 2:37 in the a.m. The victim's advocate meets them on the sidewalk in front of the hospital. Despite the woman's warm eyes and gentle smile, Joshua will forever associate her with stinging pain and loss. Doesn't help that when he showed up on his doorstep earlier with the cop, she tried to soothe Joshua by telling him grief is love with no place to go. Some bullshit off the internet. This is my cousin Nate, he tells her. Pleasure to meet you, Nate. Wish it was under better circumstances. Can we get this moving? Yes, of course, Nate. Of course, Nate, she says. Detective Mullen is waiting for us. Us. As if they're in this together. Even with her promised follow-up, Joshua knows this is a lie. He's the one who failed to protect all that is near and dear. This woman can't nudge him through what's to come. You said someone's sitting with your mother, she asks as they move through the building. My girlfriend, Alani, Joshua says, and two friends, Rachel and Isaiah. Good, I'm glad your mother isn't alone. There's a layer of something ethereal gauzing everything. 1 minute they're walking, and the next they're on the elevator, and Joshua's not even sure how they got there. His heart is racing, thoughts spiraling, stomach queasy with nausea. A ping sounds with a lit up G, ground level. The doors flash open. The victim's advocate steps off, then Nate. Joshua lingers in the open elevator. Nate turns to him. You sure you can do this? Joshua nods a lie and steps out. Halfway down a hallway that's long but not long enough, the cop meets up with them. He's close to the end of his 20, looks ready to put his Glock 19 in a gun safe for good. Without speaking, he leads them to an unmarked door, a gray box on the wall next to it. This is one of the older areas in the hospital, down in the bowels of the building, with ready access to the loading docks for the hearses, Joshua realizes. The cop hesitates, his hand hovering over the gray box. Again, I'll encourage you to wait until after the funeral home has picked up. We're not waiting, Nate says. We want to see him. Nate's impatience counters the grief that thickens the air like humidity. He's steady as always, shatterproof. Joshua is thankful his cousin is here. His own brain is stuck in a loop of that earlier conversation with the victim's advocate. She'd explained how she helped families, particularly those whose loved one was murdered. A burning, tingling rash prickles Joshua's neck and chest, and he scratches at it. Hives on top of everything else. You really don't need to be here, the cop says. We have preliminary ID from... That's fine, Nate interrupts again, but we'd still like to see him. We don't typically allow... Nothing typical about this situation, Detective Mullen. The cop glances at the victim's advocate, and when she looks away, he sighs, flips open the cover of the gray box, snatches the phone housed inside, mutters a few words, and then a buzzer sounds and the unmarked door clicks. The cop holds it open for Joshua and Nate to enter. Down to the end of the corridor, he says. Last door on the right. Joshua's dazed, but he manages to shuffle his feet. Beside him, Nate skulks, keeps his head forward, not looking in any of the rooms they pass. Joshua can't help looking. Stainless steel tables, drains in the floors, scales, lots and lots of sinks. The last room at the end of the corridor on the right, though, is different. Could be a lounge with its carpet and soft lighting, which leaves Joshua with a fleeting hope he'll discover this is all a terrible mistake. Nate's first into the room. His legs buckle as he takes in the carefully positioned gurney. He cries out, curses, and punches a wall. Joshua steps in behind his cousin, holds his breath like he's underwater. The cop and the victim's advocate stand back, but when Nate kicks over a chair, the cop's shooting hand drops to his waist and he takes a step in Nate's direction. Joshua is instantly in the cop's path, blocking his way. The cop squints his eyes. Joshua angles his head. "We'll give you a moment," the victim's advocate says, and she gently takes the cop by the arm and pulls him back. The door snicks shut behind him. Joshua lets out that held breath. Now that the woman and the cop are gone, he's left to deal with the wreckage in this cold, unwelcoming room. He plops in a chair by the gurney, loosens the knot of his tie. Bruises are often secrets on darker skin, but his little brother's face is mottled with blotchy purple discolorations. A gash in his chin, a busted lip, right eye swollen like a chocolate Easter egg. It's inexplicable that anyone would do this to Darius. He was all about his computer designs, his sneakers, and this new girl he'd been seeing. Wouldn't stop talking about some artificial intelligence class he hoped to take in September. Rutgers University won't be happening now. Instead, there'll be an autopsy. The medical examiner will cut Darius up. Joshua can't bear the thought. He desperately wishes he could rewind time all the way back to strolling the boardwalk down in Seaside Heights, dragging a tiny, wide-eyed Darius along to attract girls like a 3-week-old Labrador. Nate letting Darius beat him at air hockey, tenderly wiping powdered sugar off of Darius' face from the funnel cake. Rachel and Isaiah are devastated. Darius was like their little brother, too. Who would do this? The door opens and the cop sticks his head in. Everything about him breeds distrust. He's been coy and guarded from the start, fixing to chalk this up as just another dead black boy. "Fuck that," Joshua says out loud. And Nate, almost as if he's reading Joshua's mind, nods and says, "Not this time." So that's the opening passage of Smoke Kings, which is Nate and Joshua discovering again that Darius has been gone. And as they say at the end of that, scene, "Not this time." And so they decide that those candlelight vigils that I talked about, the Twitter hashtags, none of that is going to be enough. And they're going to do some real action. So they hatch this plan to kidnap, again, the descendants of long ago perpetrators of hate crimes and charge them reparations. And I based it on some real hate crimes that have occurred. In many instances, I did change the name. One of the things that I found out that was really interesting, I'm here in Jersey. I grew up, and my perception of lynching was that it was something that happened in the South, and primarily only in the South. And I still have very, many family, in Virginia. And I discovered that there was a young man named Mingle Jack that was lynched. And he's the only documented lynching in New Jersey, but 10, 15 minutes away from where, I grew up in New Jersey. And that was shocking to me. I did a lot of research. Brian Stevenson has an organization in Alabama that has documented the 4,500 or so lynches that have taken place, documented in the United States. And so I did a lot of research using some of the resources there to find out about some of these real crimes that have happened. There was a man that was forced to jump off a bridge in Alabama, and they knew who forced him to jump off the bridge. There were a group of young white men that forced him to jump off the bridge, and they were, found not guilty because the judge said we couldn't say with 100% certainty that the young man jumping off the bridge is what actually killed him. And so, again, there was a certain amount of rage that I felt, going through and learning about some of these different lynchings and things that had occurred in the past. There were newspaper articles where they would, document it like they were documenting a high school basketball game in the local newspaper. And they would talk about, the black person hanging from a tree, and families were there in the town square watching this, and his eyes bulged out when he was hung, and just horrific stuff that really made you angry to read it. And so again, that, informed a lot of the research that I did. I felt like it was important that the group, these four that decide to carry out this revenge, were carrying it out with descendants of people that had done things that were horrible in the past, but people that they discovered were also doing horrible things themselves. And so amongst that group, we have IT, who is a tech genius and is able to hack into computers and get into people's phones. And he's the one that kind of vets the people that they decide to kidnap. And again, they're only kidnapping people that they discover are continuing in the tradition of doing horrible, things. You have Rachel, who is the only female in the group, and she's biracial and really struggling with the side of herself that is not black, and trying to figure out how she fits into the world. You have Nate, who is the leader, so to speak, of the group, and very much the activist and the angriest one of the group. And then you have Joshua, who is angry himself, but somewhat numbed by losing his little brother. And so that the dynamic between the group also becomes a part of the book, because that dynamic starts to fray over time. They kidnap a number of people, and charge them those reparations, as the premise says, and then eventually end up kidnapping the wrong gentleman. And something tragically goes wrong with that kidnapping. And that gentleman's brother is the leader of a white supremacist group called the Righteous Boys. And now he's on their trail, as is a police officer in from Alabama, named Mason Farmer. And so it becomes this kind of a chase novel, so to speak, at that point, where you have the Smoke Kings, this group, with two warring kind of oppositions after them, the leader of the white supremacist group and the police officer. Now, where I got to the point where I tried to really be honest, the police officer says and does certainly some racist things, but I thought about, there's different versions of racists, and he's a racist that works in patrols in a primarily black and brown area, and so his interactions with people are not always in the best of circumstances, and that has kind of informed how he sees the world. And he sees the world in a way that certainly is not the way that I see the world, but there is hopefully something redeeming to him if he encounters and has the right kind of dialogue. So that character offered me an opportunity to talk about that. The leader of the white supremacist group is just an evil, racist, horrible guy. And so I really just decided early on I was going to really lean into that character and his villainy. And he's almost a caricature that he's so bad, and he's so evil. And so this small group of friends have both of these gentlemen on their tail. The Smoke Kings itself, and the title of the book and the group comes from a W.E.B. Du Bois poem. It's called The Song of the Smoke, from 1907. And it was a poem about Black empowerment. And when I first read that poem, I thought, oh, wow. And I think the first line is, I am a Smoke King, I am Black. And it was about really being proud of that Blackness. And so immediately upon finding that poem, I thought, Smoke King, I am a Smoke King, Smoke Kings. And that's where the title came from. The original title, when I first did the manuscript, was White Devils. And it was really just coming from a place of anger, as I said. And I started to evolve, and I started to try to write a book that was a little bit, had some intelligence mixed with that anger. And I hope I've been able to accomplish that. When I finally got my agent, shout out to my agent, Jackson Keeler, Inkworks. He had a really strong reaction to the premise. He thought this premise of a revenge novel where, this group of young people who were charging reparations was something that he hadn't heard. So he really loved that. He loved the characters. And he told me, from the very beginning, though, he was a developmental editor, sort of an agent, which means he wants to go in there and really work on making the book as best he can before we went out and tried to sell it. And so he asked me if I was down with that. And again, this was something that has been a dream of mine for a very long time. And I was excited that he was someone that actually saw some value in it and wanted to be a champion for me. So I was like, yeah, absolutely. I'm ready to do that. And so we went through 13 rounds of edits on Smoke Kings before we started sending it out to publishers. And throughout the process of doing that, there were a number of changes that we made that I think made the book much better. In the original version, we know that Darius has been killed, but there were no actual scenes from Darius's perspective. So that was one of the things that we added in, where I went in and I wrote some scenes from Darius' perspective, so you can see the chronology of his last moments, and so you get to see who he is, what he's about, his character, and then you also get to see him in those last tragic moments. And some readers have responded to me and told me some of the Darius scenes were the most heartrending and emotional scenes, and so they weren't in the original manuscript. So I'm glad that we were able to add that. The ethnicity of one of the main characters, I changed that also in the second draft. But what we really did is, we knew this was going to be a controversial book. We knew this was going to be a challenging book. I keep saying I wanted it to be as honest as possible, because when we do talk about race, we don't talk about it in an honest way. So in those 13 drafts, we really kind of interrogated every scene, every character, every motivation, everything that was occurring to really get it to the place where I could say I did my very best to present it in a way that was honest, present it in a way that was nuanced, because I think the conversation around race is a nuanced conversation. I don't think it is a black and white conversation, no pun intended. And so I'm really proud of the work that we did over those 13 drafts to really work at teasing out and really again, as I said, interrogating every scene to get to as much truth as we could possibly get through. And this has been an incredible ride. One of the things that I'm really thrilled by has been how the crime fiction community has really embraced me. I'm on Twitter and I'm always saying, reader first, writer second. I started out one of my absolute favorite writers of all time is George Pelecanos, who writes crime novels set in Washington, D.C. And he's just amazing. And he was a writer on The Wire, Dennis Lehane, and just some of these people that I really loved. I read George Pelecanos' Writer's Reign 20-something years ago and was like, man, I would love to do that. And so I've been really appreciative of the fact that I've been embraced by so many wonderful people in the writing community. I had an opportunity a month and a half ago to fly out to LA for the Los Angeles Times Books Festival, and S.A. Cosby, who I share some commonalities with of similar age. He's born and raised in Virginia. I was born in Virginia, left when I was relatively young and came to Jersey. But S.A. Cosby's out there, and he's just setting the world on fire, the literary world. He writes just incredible novels, Razor Blade Tears and Blacktop Wasteland and All Sinners Bleed. I shared a panel with him and Brian Panowich, who was a firefighter that quit fighting fires and writing crime novels. And his newest book is called Nothing But the Bones. But I had an opportunity to be on a panel with both of those gentlemen and spend some time with them. And they say, don't meet your heroes. I've read everything that they both have written. They say, don't meet your heroes. But those two gentlemen were as gracious and down to earth and kind and supportive of me and what I am attempting to do as anyone could be. So this has been an incredible ride. There's been so many writers that I've connected with on Twitter, so many writers that read the book and gave me a blurb. Our first early blurb was from Don Winslow, who is, again, just a giant in the crime fiction community. His newest novel, it was just out, his last novel, and he's retiring. But he gave us an early blurb. And then I've gotten blurbs from so many other wonderful, wonderful, writers as well. And so this journey has been incredible. I'm humbled by it. I'm humbled when, I receive an email from Busboys and Poets asking me if I'd like to come on and talk about the book and be part of a presentation. It's just been an incredible journey. And so I'm thankful to each and every reader that has read Smoke Kings and send in a response, a review, whether the review was good, bad, or indifferent. I'm just thankful for it all and just very much enjoying the ride. And I look forward to, hopefully having the opportunity to write some more novels. Someone asked me what I was working on next. And I am working on a new novel. And they said, well, what is it about? And what I can tell, and I told them is I know who Jahmal Mayfield is as a writer. It's gritty. It's going to be a crime novel. That's what I love to read. So that's what I love to write. It's going to have a Black gaze. I try to come from my perspective, and it's going to have some social commentary as well. So anyone that reads Smoke Kings can expect that. Anyone that reads anything that I do in the future can expect that as well. I also really want to thank my publisher, Melville House. We had editors that read our pitch and said, "Wow, this is a really original and fantastic premise, but boy, is this a dark book. Boy, is this a gritty book." And for a number of different reasons, passed on it. Melville House had the courage and the enthusiasm. When I first had a conversation with my editor, I could hear the enthusiasm. And so they've been a tremendous champion of the book, and have done everything they could to get it out there and let people know about it. So appreciate them as well. And I would love to take some questions from some of you all in the audience. All right, so Madison said, because this was heavily inspired by the grief you felt losing your loved one, what was the process like unpacking your emotions as you were writing this book? Which character do you relate the most and why? It was. It came from a very personal place, and it came from a place of grief. And like I said, when I first sat down, the original title, White Devils, the original first pages that I wrote, anger, frustration, anger. And then I just reminded myself of the inspiration for the premise, which was that Kimberly Jones video, and how she married intelligence and thoughtfulness with her anger. And so I said, I don't want to lose all of the anger, but I do want to have more of a balance, and I want to write a more nuanced book. And then I discovered that W.E.B. Du Bois poem and went back into the manuscript and crossed out that White Devils and wrote instead Smoke Kings. And that was a huge turning point for me. It was a huge turning point for the novel to be. The character I relate the most with and why, I would probably say Nate, who is the leader. He has a certain amount of anger, but he is a very, very nuanced character. He has sides to him that everyone on the surface doesn't recognize or realize, but as you go through the book, you start to learn more about who he is. And ultimately, the choices that he makes, some that are very violent, some that are very brutal, are choices that he's making because he has a great deal of love in his heart and hurt at losing his cousin. What's the hardest part about writing crime fiction, and how do you create those intense and high pressure moments? Uh, Crime fiction, something has to happen, and so I think the plotting. Um, I personally like crime novels that are really character driven. So, it's important to have characters that have some depth and that are interesting, that you want to follow for 300-400 pages. But you also have to have a plot that continues to move and surprises and goes in directions that readers may not expect. And that's what makes it interesting. So figuring out those plot points and those surprises and those different misdirections and things was probably one of the most challenging part. Now, how do you create those intense and high pressure moments? Lean into my own fears. I thought, as I'm writing it, I think about, well, what would really make the hair on the back of my neck, not on my head, the back of my neck, what would make the hair on the back of my neck stand up in some of these moments? And so those are the things that I try to incorporate in those moments. Shout out to Lori, Madison's co-worker. She said, when you write a book, do you know how it ends when you first start drafting? I think because I'm trying to write crime fiction, you have writers that go in different directions. You have some that are pantsers that kind of just write, and then plotters. And I'm certainly more of a plotter. So a couple of things about my writing process. Number one, my first draft, I don't write in the computer. I don't type in the computer. I write longhand. So I like yellow legal pads, and I like writing with pencils or really thin pen. And so, that slows down the writing and at least in my experience, makes it more thoughtful with what I'm doing. And then once I go and actually transcribe that into the computer, I'm inevitably changing things, which then gives me almost like a second draft immediately. But as far as do I know how it ends when I'm first drafting? I know how I want it to end. I know how I think it's going to end because I do plot out most of the book, or all of the book actually. But I love those moments when I'm writing where inevitably it goes in a different direction. The characters take over, and then I end up going in directions that even surprises me. And I love those moments because if I'm surprised as the creator, I would like to believe that readers will be surprised as well. Thank you for that question, Lori. There's always been controversy about what is the right way to protest and demand justice for the ways in which marginalized people have been wronged. How do you think your book contributes to these conversations about what marginalized people should do to get justice? One of the things I think is interesting about protests and demanding justice and things of that nature is, again, and this is one of the conversations that we have, when looting and rioting happens and a protest goes from being a protest to being violent, people get all up in arms and they get really, thrown by that. And I've said violent reactions are probably justified more often than they actually happen. There's just some things that are so maddening, that are so beyond imagination that it could have happened. Like a police officer having his knee on a man's neck for over 9 minutes as that man says he can't breathe and begs for his mom. I can't be upset at anyone that sees that and reacts in a really violent, I don't care anymore kind of a way. And so that was one of the things that I wanted to talk about in Smoke Kings, but also, that may be justified in some way, but when we do respond that way, inevitably bad things are going to happen. And so that was one of the really, the conversations that I wanted to really get across in Smoke Kings. What advice do you have for this younger Black generation about what to do with their anger and injustice? Educate yourself first. learn about, there's a lot of things in the moment that can make us angry. There's a lot of things in the moment that can cause you frustration. But this is a journey and a battle that we've been fighting for a long, long time. And on the cover copy, it says, this has been going on in the streets 62 years at the Emmett Till. So for the younger generation, learn your history. Learn about Emmett Till. Learn about Tulsa, Oklahoma. Learn about the, exonerated five in Central Park. Learn about all these injustices and things that have happened in the past. Because by understanding it and knowing it on a deeper level, you can have more righteous anger, I think. And you can respond to that righteous anger in a way that is more intelligent and is more thoughtful. And so I think it's really important that all of us have a real strong knowledge of the history of oppression and marginalization that has happened. I would also say, and was one of the other things that I tried to explore in Smoke Kings as well, Black folks have definitely had it tough and definitely continue to have it tough. But there are other marginalized communities as well. They're, look around you and look at other communities that have been marginalized. And just as you want your voice to be heard, listen to their voices as well, because that makes you a fuller person. And when you're a fuller person, you can have fuller conversations. Well, I thank you all for all of those wonderful questions. And I thank Busboys and Poets for, giving me an opportunity to come on and talk about Smoke Kings and read. And, this has just been another just a very humbling experience that I've had with the release of Smoke Kings. I hope those of you out there paying attention will pick it up and read it and give it a chance. And would love to hear from you either through email, Jahmal Mayfield at gmail.com. Hit me up on Twitter. Certainly go to the review sites if you read the book, and let the world know what you think about it. So thank you all so very much. And this has just been humbling.
I'm sorry, Jahmal. We actually had one more question, if you don't mind. From the
I don't
chat.
mind. I love questions. Yeah.
I'll just feed it to you through here. What was was writing this book therapeutic for you?
That is the exact word that I would use. It was absolutely positively therapeutic. As I wrote the book, my anger dissipated, and the way that I was processing my grief was kind of similar to somehow the characters in the book were processing the grief, and it helped me very much in that process. So, wonderful question.
Thank you again so much, Jahmal. This is a wonderful conversation, and we're so happy that we had you on stage with us tonight. I also just want to remind our audience that if you want to pick up Smoke Kings, you can actually find it at pretty much any one of our locations. So definitely come in and get the book that way. You can also order it alongside a meal with our Books to Go program through Uber Eats, DoorDash, Postmates, and Grubhub. And just want to thank you all again for joining us tonight, and we hope to see you at another one of our events. Have a great night.
Thank you so much.